Jonathan Schrager here for Stretty News TV, and I'm joined today by former Manchester United midfielder Luke Chadwick, who represented the club, the first team between 1999 and 2004. First of all, Luke, just a quick one. How are we doing today?
Yeah, very well, thank you. Very well indeed.
Good stuff. Well, obviously, I appreciate the time today. Thanks for taking a bit of time out to chat with us. Really, just to discuss your time at Old Trafford and not only the first team, but obviously coming through the ranks as well as a youth team player. We were discussing a little bit off camera there. Could you just talk us through the process of when you were first approached by United as a youngster and how you came to playing for the youth team?
Yeah, I was playing for the Cambridge schools at the time, scoring a fair few goals. I used to be a striker back then. And playing at Arsenal School of Excellence as an under-14, and Man United come to one game, a scout called Ray Medwell come and scouted me and invited me up, and I stayed at the Castlefield Hotel in Manchester and went away to Ireland in the Milk Cup, and it all went from there really, and I just loved the club from then and just really enjoyed being part of it.
That's interesting. So essentially you were scouted whilst playing for Arsenal?
Well, I was scouted because the schools football back then was the big one where most players were found. So I was playing for Cambridge schools when I was scouted, but I was playing for Arsenal on a Sunday.
Right. Okay. So Arsenal, you think, had it not have been United then ultimately that you'd have gone to, do you think it would have potentially been Arsenal that you'd have come through the system?
I think I probably would have ended up signing. I was always a Cambridge United fan, but for some reason they never asked me to play, so I never ended up going there. So when Man United come calling, there was only one place I was going to sign, really.
Fantastic. And just, I mean, obviously I remember hearing about you well before you made your first team debut. Obviously, most United fans that sort of take a keen interest in the youth system as well start to hear about players that are showing a lot of promise and emerging through the team. And obviously, you were one of those players that was highly touted. Can you remember sort of Sir Alex when you first arrived at the club? Did you have a lot of dialogue with him, and was he kind of excited about you as a prospect?
Well, I think I come up before I signed as a 14, 15-year-old and played a friendly game at Littleton Road against Nottingham Forest.
Yeah.
And by the time I got home, Alex Ferguson had phoned my mum up. So for him to do that as me being a 15-year-old, it was incredible, really. But it was the same with all the young players. He'd know everyone's name down to the under 9s and 10s. I think it was that interest that he's shown is what made all these young players come through, knowing that they were so cared about at the club.
Yeah. And what's your kind of, I mean, it's a real special, when you look at your period at the club, obviously if you look at it in its entirety from 95 to say 2004, it's a real special period of the club, not just for the first team, but also for the youth system. I mean, it was renowned at the time for being one of the best youth systems really in the world. Was it a very special time to be there, even as a youth player as well?
Oh yeah, it's an incredible place to be. Obviously when I arrived, the club was still at the Cliff, and it was such tight-knit there with the staff, the first team, the youth team, the reserves. Everyone was so close together. It was a really incredible place to be. And as a young lad coming up from Cambridge, being around all the big stars, it was an amazing experience, something I'll never forget for the rest of my life.
And is there anything specific that you sort of remember being an impressionable teenager and sort of training day in, day out and seeing people like Cantona at the Cliff?
Yeah, obviously. I remember one day I was meant to be cleaning Gary Pallister's boots, and I think my attitude weren't that great towards cleaning the boots at the time, but he told me in no uncertain terms that they weren't to be left dirty again. So after that, I really pulled my finger out and started doing my bit around the place.
Right, yeah. Right, fantastic. And sort of talking about prior to maybe Sir Alex giving you the call up to the first team, your sort of youth side and the players that you played alongside as a 17 to 19-year-old, who are the other names that maybe United fans from a younger generation might have heard of?
I think the main players that really made it out of that youth team was Wes Brown, who was a year above me, and John O'Shea was the same year. There's also Richie Wellens and Paul Rachivka, who also made decent careers out of the game, but they were Wes and John O'Shea were the big ones that really, really came through.
And were they, yourself playing alongside them, was there something about them that you could see even at an early age that made you believe that they would go on to make a definitive impact in the first team?
Yeah, I think I did definitely with John O'Shea, because he was the same year as me, and he come over, I think it was maybe 3 or 4 months later than the rest of us started, and at the time I was sort of had a bit of pace about me and I could sort of get past everyone, but then when John come, he was the one that would always run at me and just tackle you every time and take the ball off you. And when I played against him, I thought, this guy's got a real chance.
Yeah, fantastic. And who were you close with then in the youth team? Was there sort of a few teammates that you were particularly close with?
Yeah, I think just all the lads, because it's obviously you've just left school, there's such a great camaraderie built among them young players. You're all buzzing to be playing football every day, and I think I couldn't really pick out one person, but we were all really close. We used to go and eat together, and obviously the lads out of town would stay in digs, so we spent a lot of time together.
Fantastic, yeah, and obviously I'm not far. I don't live far from the Cliff. I'm a North Manchester boy, so the Cliff's pretty near. Were you based? The digs, were they based in North Manchester? Were they based in Prestwich, maybe?
No, my digs, there was a couple of us lived at Littleton Road, Milnthorpe Street on Littleton Road, and a lot of the lads lived over right by the Cliff. There was a big house there where a lot of the lads stayed, so it was all in and around the area.
Fantastic, yeah, fantastic. And I was going to say, you alluded to it there as well. Not only the kind of quality of the football and education, if you will, but also the family atmosphere that was cultivated at the club. I know when I talked to a lot of your fellow United trainees, people like Danny Pugh and Danny Higginbottom and who else have I spoken to? Danny Webber, Danny Nardiello, a lot of Dannys. When I speak to them, they all touch upon like the family atmosphere, like you mentioned before. It was all very, very tight knit, wasn't it?
Oh, without a doubt. I remember playing for Arsenal and it was all seemed a bit just coming in and playing. But the second I went up to Manchester, you felt part of something. It felt just incredible to be there. You didn't want to go home. It was a real family feel to it. You sort of just made you feel welcome straight away. And from the first moment I went out there, I knew that was a place I wanted to sign.
Fantastic. And do you remember the moment, so you've been playing for, say, the youth teams between the ages 17 and 19, and then you sort of progressed into the first team. I wanted to ask, do you remember much, do you recall vividly the moment you found out that you were going to make your sort of break into the first team?
Not really. I made my debut against Aston Villa in the Worthington Cup when the gaffer used to play all the young lads. That would have been, I think I was 17 then. But then after that, I went on loan off to Belgium for Royal Antwerp. And I really loved it out there. And I got called back, and I wasn't expecting, I was expecting just to go back to reserves, but I was sort of thrown in with the first team and played against Watford again in the Worthington Cup and had a good game. And then after that, I was really thrown in with the first team lads. So it was quite a shock to be with them so soon when I returned from Belgium.
And was it a bit of a blur, or do you recall kind of Sir Alex saying, all right, Luke, you're going to make your debut for the first team now?
Yeah, I remember my Premier League debut, I come on against Middlesbrough at Old Trafford. I think we was winning 1-0 and I come on with maybe about 1 or 2 minutes left, and I just couldn't get enough of it. I just couldn't stop running about. It was an incredible buzz. Yeah. And I remember making my debut against Derby at Pride Park, and we won 3-0. I had quite a good game that day, so it was incredible memories I'll certainly never forget.
And the first team, something I mentioned with a lot of the younger lads as well who progressed to make debuts in the first team, is they always mention first team initiation. I don't know if do you remember yours?
Yeah, I don't think I could really talk about that on camera. It was a worrying time for all us young lads. I remember when you come up as an apprentice, it is quite a worrying time, the initiation period. But when you've done it, the relief of having got it done, you do feel more part of it in the end. I'm not sure if that sort of thing still goes on today.
Did you have to sing a song by any chance as well?
Yeah, there was all singing, dancing. You were doing all sorts for the lads. I remember my first pre-season trip. We went to Bangkok, and I had to do a speech there, and that was quite nerve-wracking in front of some of the best footballers in the world. Right.
Okay. Yeah, I suppose with it being in Bangkok, it could have probably been more embarrassing, I suppose. But yeah, no, right, fantastic. And do you remember? if you look at your kind of your time at United and the first team appearances, I think it officially made 38 first team appearances in competitive matches. What's your sort of fondest memory when you look back on it? I know obviously you won a Premier League medal in 2001, but overall, what was your fondest memory?
I think my best moment was scoring my first goal. I remember playing at Valley Parade against Bradford, and we was 0-0 at half time. We weren't playing the best. We ended up winning 3-0, and David Beckham sent me through an incredible pass, and I stuck it in my left foot, which surprised me a lot. But it was right in front of the United fans, so that was probably the pick of the moments I had at the club, I think.
Fantastic. Yeah, was that? I mean, obviously, I know you scored 2 goals, didn't you? The one against Bradford, the one against Leeds. First of all, I was going to ask, you haven't got anything against Yorkshire in general, have you?
No, yeah, I thought that. To be fair, throughout my career, I've scored a fair few goals against Bradford, so it must be something in the air up there, I think.
And it wasn't the game where Scholesy scored like a volley from a corner, from a Becks corner, was it?
No, well, it was the one where Gary Walsh has gone to kick it out and he's gone straight to Sheringham and he's hit his other foot as Walsh went to kick it, and then Teddy just sort of tapped it in the empty net.
Right, I'm with you. Yeah, I vaguely recall it now.
Yeah.
So what was? I mean, obviously you spent a few years around the first team. I know obviously you went out on loan a couple of times as well, but from your time in and around the first team, not just the pitch time you had, but also training sessions, etc. Who were the players that just wowed you watching them on a daily basis?
I think the best player was Paul Scholes. I think everyone probably says it, but Paul Scholes was an absolute genius. He could run a training session by just playing one touch. Wouldn't even have to take more than that. He was just an absolutely incredible player. But obviously, being a winger, I used to watch the way Ryan Giggs ran with the ball. He was a joy to. He's hard to play against, but a joy to watch. And the amount of how Beckham crossed it was always things that I was looking at. And them two of the best at the time, probably the 2 best wide players in the world, I would have said.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's some football in education to sort of have those two to learn from. With Beckham, out of curiosity, I know obviously with crossing and things like that, there's an element of it being inherent and a natural ability to cross a football technique wise, but it's obviously something he honed his craft a lot and many hours on the training field. Is it something when you know that there's a player that good at that particular element, do you pick his brains? Do you try and learn that particular element from that player?
I think he just walks you. David Beckham just trained so much, probably more than any other player. The amount he practiced, it was no wonder he had it. He sort of just tried to watch how his body moved, how he would whip that ball in that space and just try and copy that. But obviously, he was hitting it more or less 10 out of 10 times. It was incredible to watch the accuracy that he had with a football at his feet.
Yeah. Do you think it is something, though, just out of interest? Because I know you coach some of the younger kids now at Cambridge, don't you? I know you work with some of the younger kids there.
Yeah, doing a little bit of coaching now, yeah.
Do you think it is something like when you have a skill like that, is it something you can impart on younger footballers coming up?
Yeah, I'm a great believer in everything from the practice. It's all practice. I don't think anyone's born with being able to kick a ball like that. I think it's the amount that you do it, and if you continue doing it and practice, and obviously David Beckham's a prime example of how practice does make perfect in a way, especially the way that he crossed and took free kicks and everything, really. Yeah, no,
absolutely. I was going to ask you as well, who were your kind of, I mean, I think maybe by then I spoke to someone obviously who you'll have played with as well and known, Raymond van der Houw, when I was out watching United play PSV a couple of weeks ago. I went to meet Raymond and he said that by a certain time, the notion of kind of having a roommate kind of went away. I think everyone had their own rooms. But was there a time in the first team at all where you had to share a room and had a roommate?
I think one time I shared with John O'Shea, but apart from that, we all had our own rooms. We always thought we'd just get stuck in. There'd be 3 or 4 of the young lads in the room, but it was incredible, really. It was 18, 19 years old, but we had our own room. You were certainly very well looked after at the club.
Yeah, and is there any relationships from your time in and around the first team that have endured as well? Anyone that you speak to still to this day?
No, I think that's the thing with football, really. I did speak to a few of the lads, obviously, after I left, but it's like ships in the night, really. You don't know where you're going to be the next day in football. So unfortunately, I've not really kept in contact with any of the lads.
Yeah, no, fair enough. I wanted to ask as well, I mean, if you just look back on your time playing for United, I mean, like I alluded to it before as well, you were very highly touted as a youngster coming through. And obviously, a lot of the young lads that I've spoken to, they all reiterate the same point about how hard it is to get into the first team and be a first team regular at United. You were highly touted, and I know you won a Premiership medal, but ultimately, when you left the club, was there any sense of disappointment there? Was it a source of frustration when you left?
Not really, because I think it got to the start when I did leave. Obviously, I'd been on loan a few times. I knew that the chance had gone at United, and it was time to move on. I was quite wanting to get back down south. My wife was pregnant, and we wanted to sort of get back to the Cambridge area for the kids to grow up. So it was an incredible sort of whirlwind at Manchester. I went up there as a kid. I never really expected to make the first team, but to do what I'd done was incredible, really. But I'm not sure I was always ever 100% comfortable with being at the club that size sort of thing. I think I was more inclined to just enjoy a quiet life and not really have that ambition to be a big, massive superstar that obviously all the Man United players are.
So do you think as well, it's quite interesting you mentioned that. Do you think a lot of it is as well, sometimes maybe having the personality to want to have the sort of stardom that goes along with being a player at a club of the magnitude of United nowadays? Because like you say there, maybe you didn't really want that went along with it.
Yeah, obviously it's the most famous club in the world. So if you're a player at that club and you sustain that for over a period of time, I think it does take an incredible person and footballer to live with that sort of the high pressure environment of every day of your life, really.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And what I mean, you've discussed him a little bit before. Sir Alex, obviously widely regarded as one of the best managers of all time. What's your abiding memory of being around Sir Alex and just playing under him as well?
Oh, the incredible man. I couldn't speak any highly of him, really. It was just the way that he ran the club. He was always fair, and you see that every single player there would have run through a brick wall for him. And I think because he had that respect to the players, that's why he was obviously so successful, probably the most successful manager ever, probably.
Yeah, and did you ever get the hairdryer treatment, or did you manage to avoid it?
But one time. It still gets to me today. I still can't think about it today.
Was it a particular game or particular performance, or?
It was actually a reserve game, and it definitely weren't a great performance from myself, that's for sure.
Right, but again, I suppose that shows, with it being a reserve game, that he still cared at that level, that he wanted you to perform even at that level.
Oh, right, the standards that the man had were so high, whether it be a reserve game, A-team game, B-team game, everyone had to certainly have the right attitude and be prepared to work hard every day.
And was it a matter of him actually being present at the reserve game to watch it, or had he just been given a report after the game?
No, he was there. He was there.
Right.
That made it even worse, really.
Right, yeah, fair enough. And what was it about a lot of people, and you mentioned it before, he knew everyone's name, your parents' name, he took an interest in you personally. Is that the one characteristic that you think, I mean, I know he's like, if you look at Sir Alex now, he's gone on to, he's written books on leadership, and he's kind of now seen as a mentor generally in the business world as well, not just within the sporting world. What characteristics about him, apart from him being, like, say, a winner and having high standards and being personable, were these all the things that made him the great manager he was?
Yeah, without doubt. I think honesty as well. I don't think he'd always be someone's face. There'd be no sort of speaking behind anyone's back, that sort of thing. I think he's just sort of, like you say, writing books on leadership. I think he probably knows everything there is to know about that particular subject.
Yeah. And ultimately, when you did leave, was it a conversation that you and Sir Alex had? Because a few of the lads that I spoke to said, some of them had maybe a year or two left on the contract. Some of them were not advised to leave, but it was suggested maybe it would be a good idea for them to seek opportunities elsewhere. Others, Sir Alex, maybe encouraged to stay a bit longer. What was the scenario with you when you left the club?
I think it was always on the cards. I've been on loan, I think, at Burnley for the full season, and I come back, and I was always looking to get away. I went on tour to America with the first team, but it was always a case of just waiting for something to happen to hopefully get back down south. And then West Ham come in, so I ended up going there. And the manager just said it was obviously time. We both agreed it was time to move on. I've not really made an impact for a good 2.5 years from when I did make a few starts and played a few games. So I think all parties knew it was time to move on.
Yeah, no, fair enough. And you played a lot in especially in the season that you won your Premier League medal, 2001, and then I know you played. I think the season after you played 8 games as well in the Premiership. There was a lot of big characters at the club that you played alongside. I think Barthez might have been there for a year, that you were there, a couple of years while you were there. People like that. Who were the biggest characters in and around the dressing room?
I think there was a fair few. I think Giggsy was always the top man. Obviously, he was a funny guy, and everyone had that utmost respect for him. Obviously, Roy Keane was an incredible leader. Obviously, with the gaffer as well, standards were always high with Roy in training and all that sort of thing. Yeah. Barthez he didn't speak much English, but he was an incredible footballer. He used to play on pitch most days in training, and he was as good as the rest of the lads, to be fair. So Gary Neville, Phil Neville, they was always big on bringing the team together, sort of getting the lads out for a meal, that sort of thing. There was some fantastic people there.
Fantastic. Well, when you say Barthez, he was as good. Do you actually think he could have made it as a footballer, as an outfield player as well? Was he that good?
I think he probably could have. I think he used to have all the skills and that. He could pick a pass as well. You could see that. He sort of played on pitch when he was in goal in a way.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And you mentioned as well before about sort of Giggsy and Beckham and those two wingers, but obviously another winger that came to the club the year before you left, especially if we consider your primary position whilst at Old Trafford as a right midfielder, then obviously you could, if you were viewed as David Beckham's understudy as such, and then Cristiano Ronaldo comes in 2003. Was it a sense of as well? Was it an unenviable task really to try and kind of displace these world class players? And that's you're always going to have that kind of issue at Old Trafford, aren't you?
Oh, without a doubt, at a club like that, you're always going to have good players ahead of you. But it weren't a case of I could ever really knock on the manager's door and say, "Look, I should be playing here," because you got the best player and one of the best wingers in the world playing ahead of you. So, but obviously, looking back now, it was an incredible place to learn the game, and then obviously go off and play football in the lower leagues for the last 10, 12 years or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. Just a couple more now, and obviously appreciate the time. I always ask it, and it depends obviously if you're at liberty to disclose anything. Are there any stories that, like any amusing anecdotes or anything from Christmas dues or anything like that from your time in and around the first team? I spoke to Ryan Shawcross the other week, and he was telling me quite a funny story about one of the Christmas parties, and they did a pantomime or something. Was there anything amusing that always comes back to you?
There is a few amusing stories about the Christmas parties, but again, probably not best to speak about on camera. But every year while I was there, the young players used to do a pantomime at Christmas for Christmas dinner, and they used to mimic the first team players. And at the time, that was hilarious, really. It was a really funny time.
Is there anything specifically that you remember doing to kind of impersonate the first team? Do you remember who you had to play?
I think I was sort of a stagehand. I don't think I was on the front stage that day. I think I was helping out behind the scenes.
Right, yeah, fair enough. And was there anything about any of the players that surprised you? I don't know, was when you got into the first team, was David Beckham a great chef, or was he, was there something random or miscellaneous about them that took you aback?
But it took me back out, sort of down to earth, because obviously I'm just a kid that had seen all these lads play on telly and watch them play, and then to go in the dressing room with them, they were all so down to earth, and there weren't one sort of bad character there. They'd all speak to you. They was all great lads, and Roy Keane in particular, who was obviously a hard man on the field, but really looked after the young players off the field. If they had any troubles, he'd be always the person to go to, and he'd always help you out as much as he can. He was an incredible influence on the young players particularly.
Yeah, absolutely. That's something that Danny Higginbottom talked about at length as well, about how Roy had been a great influence on him as well when he was coming up through the ranks. Did you ever feel the wrath of Keano in training? I think Danny Pugh mentioned that sometimes you could get a bollocking in training as well if you weren't playing up to par.
I think I can remember plenty of bollockings I had off Roy Keane on the training pitch, but to be fair, again with him, it wouldn't matter who it was. He really would tell anyone if he weren't happy with the standards at training. Particularly, it was one of them where you didn't always want to be on his team in a five-a-side.
Yeah, no, and I wanted to ask as well. Subsequent to United, and obviously you've had a good career at other clubs as well, but in terms of, I certainly know you might be able to give me a couple more instances, but obviously I know that you played against United as recent as last year, or so to say this year, with Cambridge, when you played the 2 games in the FA Cup. I spoke to a friend of mine as well, a big Red that travels home and away, and he said you got a great reception from the United fans. It's actually, I can remember hearing it on telly as well. And obviously when you came back for the replay at Old Trafford and you started the game, you got a good reception as well. Did that mean a lot that you kind of remembered fondly by fans?
That was incredible. I wasn't expecting it at all. I didn't even think anyone would remember me there. But to get the clap that I did when I come off was really really touching. It was a lovely thing to get. And not many players can say they got a standing ovation at Old Trafford. So it was an incredible feeling. I couldn't thank the fans enough for that.
Yeah. And what do you remember about the games? Obviously, have you played any other games subsequent to leaving United against United for other clubs? That was the first time, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's the only time I've ever been back there, so it was great to actually do it before finishing playing. So it was incredible to go back there one last time and to play at that incredible stadium.
And obviously, Mr. Giggs, I think, he would have been the assistant manager. Did you have a chat with Ryan after the game or anything?
I saw him before I didn't see him in the first game. I saw him before the replay and had a quick hello and how's it going and that. And it was great to obviously see him again after all them years.
Yeah. And I wanted to ask as well, final question really regarding a couple of the current issues at United. If we just isolate your position of right midfield, it's a curious position at United at the moment because it's one where Van Gaal's playing Juan Mata essentially on the right. Obviously not his natural position, but we have other natural right wingers that you might call them natural right wingers like Tonio Valencia, for example. What are your opinions on the current players that play in your position at Old Trafford?
Yeah, I think the game's changed a lot since my time at United when it was a 4-4-2 and Beckham and Giggs would be firing crosses in the whole game. I think the way it is now, he sort of plays Depay wider and then Mata sort of comes and plays in them little holes that he's so good at. And I think it's hard to get away with playing 2 out-and-out wingers in this day and age, especially if he wants to keep 2 up front. And I think the new lads coming and been exceptional, so we can't leave him out. And obviously Wayne Rooney's not going to be left out. So I think it has worked. Obviously they were really disappointing against Arsenal, but before that, it's some of the best football I've seen them play probably since Sir Alex has left. So I think the signs are good that Van Gaal's going to really get the team going again.
Yeah, and what do you think about? You mentioned obviously with Mata there. Would you prefer being a traditional winger yourself? Do you prefer seeing those kind of traditional flying wingers, or do you understand obviously the game, like you mentioned, it has evolved and therefore you've got to move along with the times?
Yeah, obviously I love seeing players with 2 wide and playing, but like you say, I think the game has evolved now, and it does with the fullbacks that play so high. It's not really always worth having the 2 wide players as well, because the fullbacks seem so fit these days that they can more or less play as a winger. I think Valencia's done that a few times.
Yeah, Yeah, no, absolutely. Really appreciate the time, Luke. Yeah, it's always fascinating to hear from ex-players and to hear their experiences. It's great. So I really appreciate the time.
No problem at all. No problem.
Lovely.